Welcome everybody. Breakout Session B. I'm Bob Dorr. I'm an IAASB member. I'll be moderating this session. Sachiko Kai is another of my colleagues on the IAASB as a member from Japan. And then Yvonne is our IAASB staff person that will be helping us today. What we'd like to do is to pick up on some of the themes I think we started to discuss. Of course, today's session is the roundtable session is dealing or focused on technology, and in today's breakout, we'd like to kind of look at technology from three different angles. We'll spend about 15 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes on each topic. You've been provided, or the questions were included in the roundtable document. And as you will be aware, there's like 10 different, 10 different questions. We're not going to take each one of those individually, but rather kind of break them into three more overarching groups of questions or topics to address, and spend some time getting some feedback in that way. And then we'll do, as Fiona indicated, a quick report back following the next break. So the first thing I'd like to do is, as Yvonne has shared here, is to focus on technology. What you're seeing or what you understand is how technology is being used to actually perpetrate fraud in today's world. So this is what fraudsters are actually using, and how that may be different from what it's been in the past, and the challenges in particular that come along with, I guess, staying abreast or staying ahead, hopefully, of what's being used to perpetrate fraud. So with that, because we have a relatively small group, perfectly willing to open up for any responses. Maybe if I could ask, just because we are a small group, if you please feel free to chime in, and if it's your first time speaking, maybe just introduce yourself, your name, and who the organization you're with. So with that, Yvonne, is that game plan for moving through our 45 minutes? Okay. Absolutely. So we'll open up for discussion. The first topic being views on technology being used to perpetrate fraud.
Yeah, if I may, this is Paul. Well, the first impression that came into my mind is, especially in the last couple of years, especially with the COVID-19, where people are kind of restricted from traveling, cutting the time from, the shopping in the malls and in the stores, etc. Especially when I see the first thing came into my mind is the increased use of online shopping. From corporate perspective, there are a lot of e-commerce or digitalization of their business has been emerging over the last 12 months or even 6 months. So that's a good thing and a bad thing, because when you trade with your customers, especially with online shopping, the buyers and the sellers actually don't meet with each other. So that gives opportunities for fraudsters to commit fraud. And we have seen many times whereby people are superstar in the computer science area, where they can hack into companies' network to basically create those sales orders, changing the price, changing the shipping address, basically to receive the goods that they don't belong to. So those type of were relatively small issues, but we have also seen like phishing emails and other type of more professional hackers, where they can hack into companies' systems, making threats, if to seek some money. Otherwise, they will destroy or making trouble to the online platform. Those kind of frauds have been on a rise in the recent period. That's something that jumps into my mind in the first instance.
Thanks, Paul. Certainly the increase, the stay at home, the lockdowns, certainly less face-to-face business being done. So I totally agree with that. Others maybe in your jurisdictions particular or your regions, anything specifically new we're seeing with respect to technology?
So it's Stefananda from South Africa. So similar to Paul, I mean, I think we've seen quite a few cyber attacks recently on some big corporates. And then from a sort of smaller enterprise perspective with sort of COVID and a lot of local businesses sort of doing business through the likes of Facebook or Instagram, we've seen quite a few instances of or I've seen quite a few instances where people have almost duplicated accounts. So sort of mirroring the exact account, and you think you're buying from that person, but you're actually not, and your money's going somewhere else. So there has been, I think, the environment of online shopping, like Paul has mentioned, and the way that a lot of people are doing online shopping, it's not necessarily through a traditional website anymore. There's a lot more through sort of social media type sites that opens up the doors to potential fraudsters to take advantage.
Okay.
Bob, it's Barb Vanich, PCOB. I mean, I'm very glad that we haven't seen any, but I know that we have concern, mostly in our space, very small issuers with digital assets. I think the vulnerability of digital assets to be either stolen from someone within the company or externally. I know that we haven't seen a lot of good audit practices, but what we've seen is not very extensive. But certainly that's one that I would put high up on the list, just the propensity of someone stealing the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, I guess maybe a little bit, well, I don't think it's unique to the US, certainly, and maybe not directly a fraud, but certainly in the realm of cyber attack, seem to be seeing much more increase in ransomware attacks, denial of service and things like that, which of course, in the end costs, corporate money normally to resolve. But others, any other technologies maybe evolving or state-of-the-art types of things that you're hearing about?
I would like to turn maybe the discussion a little bit. And Bob, tell me if I'm out of line here. Okay, yeah. I'm a little bit distressed about this backward look of the world. Meaning this makes me think about auditing. The auditor is the general that comes in after the battle and kills and shoots the wounded. And I think there is technology, same kind of technology that are being used for increased amount of fraud and et cetera, et cetera. And even the word fraud is anachronistic. It is basically kind of appropriation of resources, etc. Also, the 0-1 on fraud, is it fraudulent or not, is not right. Meaning there are degrees of fraud. There are, and I basically talk in technology. I tell my students, I don't want you to do fraud detection dissertations. I want you to do anomaly detection dissertations and predictive anomaly detection dissertation. Why? Because you run a set of filters, don't find anything, you don't know if there was fraud, there was no fraud and they didn't catch it, or the filters are not good. So I think we need to kind of change the discussion to like technological facilitators and detectors. And I think what we need to start thinking about is creating databases where types of frauds were detected, types of abuse or semi-usage or manipulation of numbers. And these libraries can be used for machine learning type of things, for continuous predictive audits type of things, and etc. So I would like much more to see kind of much more cooperation on these are the kind of things we saw. And therefore, these are the tools we can use. We have a project which I like a lot. Basically, we're looking at the dark web. And basically, we are trying to detect cyber violation from the other side. Because, you know, the whole story with cyber violation has been, how good are your protections? Did you manage it? How about saying what already happened and try to kind of develop some learning from that? I think the effort has to be really methodological, and the same tool that you use for the fraud, can use also for avoiding fraud, for detecting fraud, and to predict that this area, if you see like several attacks of ransomware in one direction, you can pretty much think about that ransomware attacks are going to happen somewhere else. So sorry, I didn't mean to kind of go totally the other way, but I think we need to start thinking much more predictively and much more systemically on this.
Well, thanks, Miklos. And that was Dr. Miklos Vassarelli from Rutgers.
I'm sorry.
Certainly does a lot of active research here in the U.S. And has been doing that for a long time from an academic perspective. So thanks for that, Miklos. And maybe
Paul was born.
and I think maybe we can use Miklos's comments to pivot a little bit, maybe to the second broad area. And I guess what I would say from Miklos is one of his final comments was using the same technology sometimes that to commit fraud is also effective in predicting or looking at where fraud might occur. So when we look at our second broad group of questions, maybe turn our focus a little bit more to technology being used by auditors. I know Sandy, as well as Steph, in our general session, spoke to this a little bit. And I think, you know, certainly there's challenges associated with using technology, but given on our session today, we have some practitioners, Steph and Paul, and you know, some others that are actually in the midst of this from day to day. Maybe just turn and get some comments or ideas, thoughts on how auditors are actually using technology in this fraud landscape these days.
Hi, it's Sarah Colson. I'm from Caseware International, and I'm an industry strategist with the company. One of the things that's happening with technology is that many of the tasks that are traditionally in the transaction cycle are now automatically flowed. So it's the computer that's doing it. There's no human segregation of duties or controls in the traditional sense, that it's all an automatic process. So how do you test the system and the algorithms that's processing the transactions to see that there hasn't been manipulation to the expectation? Just because the computer has done the transaction doesn't mean the computer has done the transaction correctly unless there's controls in place to ensure that occurs. So it's making sure that people understand, how are you testing the controls in the system? How are you evaluating those algorithms and the processes in place? Along with that is that the auditor can only get or use the data that they have access to. And some systems don't allow for full data extraction to prevent users from switching from their accounting system to a competitor's accounting system. And then with that, there's the lack of standardization of the data. So each accounting system uses different labels rather than using the ISO data standard or XBRL GL. And so it takes the auditor additional time in order to standardize that data in order to run analysis.
That's interesting, Sarah. Are you aware of any work that's being done or use of technology with respect to these disparate systems and tagging and formatting and things like that to bring consistency, to increase the efficacy of data acquisition?
Yeah, so I'm involved with the AICPA they're trying to do a data standardization. The concept is the vendors, trying to get the vendors to change it, that may not work, but, can we get a standard that everyone that's building other systems in order to test, you get it from the vendor into a process and then it automatically maps it back, or is there a standardization? So it is hard because, each of the accounting system want proprietary, this is their secret sauce in order to prevent switching. But at the other side, we need that information and we need it standardized. At Caseware, we do have, we're building pipelines of mapping. So going through what are the common ones that our customers are using, packages, and allowing the mapping of that data to make the data ingestion easier. And sometimes, depending on the system, it's still the manual mapping of the data. So we are looking at how can we make it easier for our users, the auditors, in order to obtain that information and get it into a standard format that they can run standardized tests that they can invest in.
Let me address that, complementing what Sarah is. ICAO have been supporting Engine B. And Engine B basically was created by a partner of KPMG that moved to Engine B. They put a lot of money on this, and it's basically a translation engine that bring different formats into what I call the data ecosystem. Anyone wants, I can send you my article on the data ecosystem. And I think that's a very hot business today, bringing data to some kind of standardized function, because that's the type of standard. And I was part of the audit data standard effort that the ICPA did. And there we just kind of created some guidelines. Now there is ISO guidance, there are Chinese guidelines, and etc. But I think basically, in order to employ analytics well today, you need to have some degree of standardized data. And there is big business now standardizing data, and I think there'll be much more people evolving in that direction. And that's very important. There is a vendor that actually does process mining, and they actually have a thing they call Action Engine. And you basically can put in there little AI kind of tools or regular analytic tools that why we call them crons and daemons. A cron is a time actionated engine. A daemon is an event actionated engine. And basically, the vendor is called Celonis. And basically, they are process mining vendor for basically efficiency of operation. But you can use it in auditing. And that kind of database I mentioned before, that would be very nice to collect a lot of types of frauds and et cetera, that would allow you to create little detection engines of real-time, predictive in certain cases, for a modern technology usage on fraud detection and fraud prediction.
It's certainly that helps to address the whole structuring of data acquisition spectrum. I also picked up in from a couple of our panelists in the main session the use of auditors using more unstructured data and external source information as effective ways of detecting or identifying fraud risk. Any information or thoughts around unstructured data and what firms or what auditors may be doing in that arena?
So we're using a technology. It's been phased in. One of the first sort of pilot phases of it is around using machine learning technology to be able to process and unlock value from the huge amount of unstructured data that is available. And really, a large part of it is to use that information in a risk sensing process, both from a client and acceptance and continuance assessment, but also through risk assessment during planning stages of the audit, as well as looking at how we can develop that machine learning through some of the delivery aspects of an audit. I guess the one challenge that we have from a delivery aspect is that it could potentially support routine and multiple transaction type things, but doesn't take away the need to apply professional skepticism. And often areas where we spend our most time is not an area which is sort of multiple transactions. It's sort of the bigger, more judgment areas that you're not necessarily going to be able to use machine learning around.
Yeah, we actually developed a tool that helping companies to analyze those unstructured data to detect anomalies, especially in the areas of conflict of interest, as well as potential secret related parties, if you will. So basically, the concept of the tool is fairly simple. Basically, we need a list of our clients' business partners, whether that's their customers or distributors or vendors. We need their name, and also on the other hand, we need if they wanted to check into conflict of interest issues, we need a list of their employees' names. If they can provide us the employee's telephone number, that would be even better. But the more data we have, the more analysis we can do. Basically, what we do is, with those information, we can automatically track the corporate registration information of those business partners, whether that's thousands or tens of thousands of a list long. We can do that automatically. So within a few hours, we can pull those information, do the cross check, and also cross check against the employee list. The benefit of that is, for example, sometimes we found a sales manager who's in charge of the certain BU. They have happen to be the director of certain distributors, for example. So that's naturally a conflict of interest issue. And also we found, for example, some of those major customers, they are actually linked with the company's major suppliers. So that's an indication of a potential round-tripping transaction as well. So though this is a fairly simple tool, basically we require very minimal data from our client, but on the back end we can link that back to the government's database to retrieve those corporate registration information in fairly timely manner. And also we use some of those coding to track those latitude and information. So for example, those address, even though those two different address may appear different, but they actually, for example, like the corner of Park Avenue and the Madison Avenue, the other is like a 345 Park Avenue. They actually probably present as actually is the same address. So even though they were described differently, so we can link those information in the mapping software for things like that. So basically, we use that to detect conflicting information by leveraging unstructured data.
Thanks, Paul. Very, very interesting. I guess that leads maybe showing a little bit of my interest in this topic. So how are firms, or I guess in the technology realm, with firms using more, utilizing more unstructured data, external information sources, things like that? How is I think one of the speakers earlier today mentioned the importance of accuracy and completeness of data that's used, information that's used in these types of techniques. Any views from any of the people on our breakout here on how that accuracy and completeness of that type of information is considered?
I actually want to address something a little bit different from what you said. We are very interested on what we call exogenous variables that are auditing with external variables. And we have done a whole set of projects in that direction. We have a project with the mayor's office of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, very huge thing. They run 6 large hospitals and etc. And basically we are using external variable, comparing the prices that the prefeitura is paying with what we can harvest on the internet in a base of unstructured data. We are kind of screen scraping, extracting the data, word processing to extract the variables, and then comparing the prices with the prices paid. And this is an interesting mix of audit because we have data from the prefectura and we are collecting exogenous data. And we are doing that with weather data, and we have done that with local zip code, macroeconomic data. We actually think that auditing and, of course, forensic work and fraud detection work of the future will be largely based on exogenous variables, external variables.
Any other thoughts from the group on what auditors are doing? Maybe some new different twists in using technology to either identify fraud, risks of fraud, or actually detect cases of fraud. Okay. Well, then I guess we'll turn to our third broad topic, which is really looking specifically at technology being used in a forensic type of mode or forensic audit mode. And you can see here we're interested in the current trends that's being seen, how technology is used, and of course any hurdles or how forensic type of work could perhaps lead to enhanced auditor work also. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just turn to Paul to kick this off, because Paul, I know you mentioned in your opening remarks that you had some things you'd like to share with us during the breakout. So maybe if we could kick off with Paul, and then we'll turn to others.
Sure, happy to. My real life example or real life case from China. In China, we have more and more TMT companies, whereby their value is actually not just on the profitability of the companies they can earn. It's more on the number of active users, the daily activities that those users generate. So especially for those TMT companies, we have been seeing whereby companies have the motivation to create a lot of false users or false transactions or false user activities in order to boost their business volume to achieve higher valuation. So we kind of leverage data analytics in detecting such fraud. And again, the data analytics that we use, we trace back to not just financial data, but also the operational data as well. So try to, and we need to use a little bit of industry expertise or to analyze those data. For example, if we have online, a coffee shop, what you because normally you will have one a mobile number generates one user, but what if one mobile number is actually associated with multiple users? That's certainly a red flag. And also for an online coffee shop, if you see frequently a certain coffee was ordered after, let's say, 10 o'clock in the evening, whereby the shops have actually closed and nobody is going to make those coffees for you or deliver those coffees for you, that's certainly a red flag. And also we can use some of those benchmarks. For example, store A and store B, they generate 10,000 cups of coffee each day, but the one store actually used X number of coffee beans, but the other one is using half of that size. Does that indicate manipulation of the revenue, etc.? So there are a lot of dimensions that we can analyze, again, both from operational perspective and also from a financial perspective. But the key is to basically link into different sets of data, whether that's internal data or whether that's external data, whether that's financial or operational. That's all relevant. So basically, in our experience, the more data you have, the more analysis you can provide.
Thanks, Paul. Certainly agree with that. Others, any views around these type of forensic type of work and how that might, I think most importantly, of course, to the IAASB is how we might be able to port that over and increase the effectiveness of the audit work done around fraud. So any other considerations or views?
I think, I mean, Paul's speaking a lot of now around the sort of analytics and that, and we are currently using some of those techniques, particularly when we're looking at revenue recognition and pinpointing the risk of fraud in revenue recognition, using similar sort of data and analysis, data analytics to be able to pinpoint where the risk lies, and better design procedures to address that risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Accounting Today last month had an article, the top 10 ways companies cook the books, and the schemes that they had, they weren't new schemes. Like they're schemes that, you know, I've been using in my career of, you know, going through the training and going through our audit planning, you know, would the company be able to do this? How would they be able to do it when we're planning out our audit? And so it's a case of, you know, using technology has allowed companies to process larger volumes of data and make more complicated transactions. And then auditors need to catch up in using technology to evaluate those larger data, volumes of data. And the concept of having a library of frauds that the auditors can use. These, you know, these schemes aren't new. So what are the characteristics of them so that the auditors can create audit tests, and if we can get all the data, and what are the data points that we're looking at in order to design tests?
This library of frauds, this library of fraud that you're mentioning is like the triad. You need the library of frauds, you need large amount of unstructured, semi-structured, and structured data, and you need maybe something like Paul was talking, like a PEP index. We did a project with Dun & Bradstreet, basically trying to identify politically connected people. But at the same time, we detected a lot of intercorporate liaisons, people in 3 boards, and 1 board and 1 company selling to the other, and etc. But these are stochastic, these are probabilistic relationships, and you need to kind of join them together. I think library of frauds, library of detecting devices, meaning software, library of individuals, and library of processes. All of those things would help tremendously.
Okay. I guess maybe just to drill down a little bit, because I think a theme that I'm kind of hearing here is that, you know, certainly analyzing larger amounts of data and information is very effective, especially when you're able to look at the analysis from the perspective of internally generated information, external information, financial information, operational information. And I think, you know, when we draw this back, maybe a little bit from the forensic type of work, but back into an audit of the financial statements, the standards I think today do address the accuracy, completeness, controls, things like that around information produced by the entity. But I'm just wondering, especially from some of the practitioners in our group, how you're dealing with external information. Are you concerned about the accuracy and completeness of that information, or is it really more just information that you use to better identify where you might want to drill down, you know, at some point to investigate further? Any views? That probably becomes the $99 question for the IAASB is at some point, but we're looking for help. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I'll give a short. External data is actually more challenging, of course, than internal data. I think it really depends on the quality of the data and in each local jurisdiction. For example, taking China as an example, because China is a highly regulated country, so a lot of the information is actually owned by the government and made public by the government. So on that end, you don't really have any doubt on the accuracy and completeness of the data. For example, the corporate registration information, it's all public. The litigation records, it's all public. It's just a matter of, timeless. Maybe, they update that once a month rather than, on a daily basis. But once it's on the website, 99.99% it's accurate. And also tax data as well, because tax is another highly regulated area. But there are some information where we can claw from the internet. Those information you would have to make a judgment by yourself. For example, there are certain industry data that are available. There are certain other type of trading data from different business associations that can be made available as well for comparison. But at the end of the day, data analysis is just giving the auditors a direction rather than giving them the conclusion. One thing that I often tell our audit colleagues is that you don't rely on data analysis to draw any conclusion, but rather it's a tool to help you to efficiently analyze certain information. But that takes time. And don't forget, there are a lot of false positives sometimes as well. So you really need to navigate that through.
Great point, Paul. Okay, if I could, just looking at the time we have here, we do have one kind of general question we'd like to seek your input on in our breakout session here. And that is, of course, as you're well aware, the IAASB is embarking upon this project related to fraud. And one of our main objectives is to identify where we might be able to look to help, guidance, new ideas, things like that. So we're very interested in if there's information or research related to how technology is being used to perpetrate or detect fraud that you think the IAASB definitely needs to consider. We'd like to hear about that. So I would just say if you guys have anything you could provide us in a couple of minutes here, we will log that, and that would be great. I'd also invite you also maybe offline when you have a little bit more time to certainly send an email or shoot a message to us. Perhaps Yvonne would be a good contact for that, or Angela in that regard to point us in directions that we should be looking for. So any high level ideas? What are we missing? Are there organizations or sources of information we should be looking to?
So,
go ahead. Yeah, Steph.
During the task group that we had around the fraud project in South Africa, there was a document that was circulated to us, particularly by our revenue services, around technology tools to, but more focused on tax evasion and tax fraud. So we can share that with you and see if there's anything in there that could be of use or consideration.
That's a good suggestion. I'm wondering, Sarah, I know you're with Caseware, but certainly there are, we heard from Ellie from MindBridge, and there's other third-party methodology providers certainly out there and everything. Is that, in general, is that a source? It dawns on me that we should at least be looking to commercial providers of software and technology in this space.
Yeah, so we're looking at different tools. So we build platforms, and from the platforms, then our different distributors and our customers can customize what they're doing. So with our platform, so we do have an analytics AI product. And with that, we're looking to extend that to allow the ability to do Python. So people can write their own machine learning. They can write their own audit tests. And what we're looking at and what we're seeing from the firms is that the new hires that they're getting are looking for people with technology, with Python, and they're adding them to their audit teams in order to better process the data. And sort of, auditors are sort of becoming the data scientists because that's where all the information is. And so being able to have a platform that allows people to customize, and we've been working with auditors and accountants for many years, and the concept of, not a black box, that it needs to be open. Someone needs to be able to understand it, because as an auditor, you have to, just because the computer said it, that's what the things that you're supposed to follow up on, or those the anomalies, you still have to understand, is that right? How did it come up with that answer? Does that make sense? And you're still using, and people talk about technology and will it change the auditor? Well, it allows the auditor to focus on, is this an anomaly? Using their experience, using their professional skepticism, using their professional judgment in order to focus their areas on areas with anomalies.
And just recognizing we're at the end of our time together, Miklos, I'll just throw in, obviously academia is a source of information the IAASB should be looking for, particularly some of the work that your organization and others like them have been doing. I want to just, before, I think we might just get disbanded here pretty soon, so before we do, I just want to thank everybody, certainly for spending this time with us. It's an interesting topic, and one that is always exciting to kind of hear some different views and learn something new from, and you've certainly done that for us today.